Ireland will be the most obese country in Europe.
From age 20 to age 60, the third phase of metabolism, that metabolism, human metabolism, is rock stable, does not change. So brown fat, good fat fights bad fat, white fat, and you turn it on in ways that your metabolism can actually help you. Now, cold temperature will do it, but so do certain foods. Probably it's the reason that we form some cancers. Probably it's the reason that we have dementia, at least some dementias. Probably it's the reason we have some mental illnesses, including depression and schizophrenia. Probably it's also one of the under root causes of
That
autism.
life, in principle, never ceases to hold a meaning for each and every thought.
Dr. William Lee, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Connor. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so the World Health Organization estimates that by 2030, Ireland will be the most obese country in Europe. Okay. 89% of the men will be obese, 85% of women, and 1 in 5 children will be obese. Okay, so just to get your initial reaction, what jumps front of mind there when you hear those kind of numbers? What's jumping out?
Yeah, well, I did not know those statistics, but the projections are very sobering and a bit horrifying to think through. For the reason that obesity, for the most part, is a preventable condition. Let's not call it a disease yet. Let's call it a condition because it occurs, it develops over a long period of time in our lives. And obesity is sort of the end result of our metabolism veering as far away from where it is naturally intended to be. So, in other words, if you were to think about driving on a highway to a destination and you were to get lost, you could easily, if you realized before you got lost, you needed to get back onto the road, you could refer back to your map or GPS or call somebody to help you get back onto the road. But by the time you're obese from a health perspective, you've gone way off track, far, far, far from the original road on which you set, which is intended to take us through our entire lives. That's the roadmap of our metabolism. And so at the point where obesity is classically defined, diagnosed, dealt with, we are already, let's say, lost from where we should be. So I hear statistics like that, and it makes me reflect on how important it is for us to be aware of, number one, what is normal, healthy metabolism? Number two, how do we get off track? And number three, how do we get back on track?
So could we start there, Dr. Lee, by trying to understand what metabolism is, because there seems to be a bit of confusion out there. If you could let us.
Yeah. Well, listen, metabolism is the word that everyone's familiar with, that everyone feels like they have some intuitive understanding of what that means. But in fact, it's a very, very complicated term. And in fact, I'm a medical doctor as well as a scientist. And I can tell you that the entire education I had in medical school, to my journey in becoming a doctor, metabolism was always presented to me in a very hand wavy and complicated sort of way. It's the net sum of all the chemical reactions in the body to be able to produce life in its simplest form. And then you can just get more complicated and more eggheady from that point in. And the reason that I call out the confusion about what metabolism is because I think that we are still in the process of understanding what human metabolism, how it's supposed to function. Some recent discoveries are actually very, very eye-opening and hopeful. So, most people are laboring under a few false assumptions about metabolism. I'll go through them, and you can nod your head or tell me if these are also the ones that you, like me before, I had also thought as well. Number one is that you're either born with a fast or a slow metabolism. It's sort of it's a genetic roll of the dice, what you wind up with when you're born. Number two is that when you reach middle age, metabolism is naturally going to slow down. And so people who hit their 40s or 50s or 60s pretty much resign themselves to changing their body shape and having to buy new clothes and not to look the way they look anymore. And then finally, the idea is that of metabolism, one of the big assumptions is that if you have the reason that you actually gain weight and become, quote, fat is that it's a consequence of a slow metabolism. So in other words, slow metabolism leads to obesity. All right. Now, the final thing that is a myth is that when you eat foods, you're going to get fat. And you're only going to get fatter regardless of what kind of foods that you're eating, especially the bad foods. So all four of those concepts, and I saw you nodding all throughout, I think are very commonly held assumptions about what metabolism is. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly that it's something that you're born with and that it can't be changed.
Yeah. Now, let me now break these down and try to smash the myths, bust the myths. I always tell people one of the joys that I have of being a researcher and a physician, a doctor who also writes books, and I'm coming on podcasts. I love to bash myths because I think that science is not only the defining truths, in our world, but it also helps us uncover where the assumptions we've long held in some cases, like metabolism, might not be true. And the actual truth, the new light shining on the truth might actually be good news, not bad news. Well, so what I would like to do is come back to addressing some of those myths with the latest scientific evidence that reveals something new about our understanding of what our metabolism really is and what we can do about it. Okay, first, the first assumption is that we are born with different metabolisms, and it's just by chance that we have a fast or a slow metabolism. The classical thing that people hear about is someone saying, my sister was lucky. She was born with a fast metabolism. She's skinny as a stick and she can eat anything. And me, unfortunately, I was cursed with a slow metabolism, and I've had a battle with food my entire life. Okay. That's a classic statement that I've actually heard for myself. Now, here is the thing. Our metabolism is really the system in our body that is formed when we're still in our mother's wombs. Okay. And it's a body system like our circulation, like our heart system, like our brains, like our thyroid, like our kidney. What makes us think that human metabolism is just a crapshoot during the formation in our mom? In fact, here's the actual truth. When we're born, for the most part, everyone, we are all born with the exact same metabolism as the next baby in the next delivery suite in the same hospital. In other words, the same way that we're born with 10 fingers and toes, we're born with a tongue, eyes that work the same way, ears that work the same way, so too is our metabolism punched out of the womb like a chocolate chip cookie, like 1, 1, 1, 1. It's going to be exactly the same. All right. And so that's part of our hardwiring in our body. Now, let me try to explain simply what metabolism is. So that system that we're born with is the manner in which our body brings energy or fuel to power our functions. Now, when I say fuel, I'm being very intentional. It's like if you drive a car, you have to go from point A to point B. You might go to the grocery store. You might go to the park. You might go to the pub, right? You're going to get into the car and you're just going to drive. You're not going to think about the fact that your car is running on fuel. Now, just like our bodies, we have to periodically stop to refuel our cars. And we don't even think about the fuel until the fuel gauge is running on low or running towards empty. And then suddenly we're focused on it and can't think about anything else. I got to get to the gas station, petrol station. Where is it? Okay. I got to get a few liters. All right. Now, it's the same way that our body works. The food that we eat is the fuel that we put into our body, and our metabolism takes that fuel and turns it into energy. And that energy is what allows us to get up in the morning, take a shower, go to work, speak on the phone, scroll through the internet, run a road race, what have you. That is what our metabolism is. Now, I bring up the analogy of the car because just like being a driver in a car, we pay no heed to the actual mechanisms of what's happening inside the car, right? Most of us, unless you're a mechanic, you don't even think about how that gas is being burned down and expelled and put through the combustion and into the cylinders of the car. Okay. By the same token, we don't actually think about how our metabolism actually works. But there are some reveals that tell us why, when metabolism is off track, off road, lost, why we gain weight and have all these terrible diseases and conditions, starting with obesity. Okay, so in a car, when you need to fill up on fuel, you pull over to the petrol station. I believe you call it a petrol station, right, or a gas station?
We call it gas station. We call it petrol.
Okay, yeah. So you go to the petrol station and you take the pump, the nozzle out, put the pump into the gas can, the gas hole, and you hit you squeeze the pump handle, and gas flows into the tank. The gas tank is made of metal. It can only carry so much gas, and it fills up by itself. And by the way, you shut the engine off because you don't want to be burning the gas while you're filling it up, right? So then the gas tank fills up. And when it's actually at the top, all right, there's an automatic switch that stops the inflow of the gasoline, of the petrol, all right? Then you take the nozzle out and put it back in, get into the car, start it up again, and drive away, okay? So how does this work with our metabolism in our bodies? Same way. When our fuel is low, we feel hungry. Our body is wired so that our brains tell us, hey, the fuel gauge is running on close to empty. We better get some fuel. So what do? We don't pull over to the petrol station. We pull over to the restaurant. We pull over to the kitchen, to the table, to the refrigerator, to the pantry, to reach for something to eat. Because just like at the petrol station, we're putting fuel into our bodies when we put food into our bodies. Now, the fuel at a petrol station, we call them, they're labeled as liters of fuel, right? Food doesn't carry that same nomenclature in terms of like volume. We don't call food liters. What do we call food? We call them calories. So when you hear about calories, all right, you're just talking about the measure of the energy that food gives you. So the more food you eat, the more calories you're taking in. It's just like putting gas into your tank, the more liters you put in. Here's the thing. Unlike a car, which will automatically stop the pump when the tank is full, our body doesn't have a clicker to stop the pump. What that means is that's very easy for us to overflow our own tanks by continuing to put fuel into our bodies. Now think about this. If you're at the petrol station and imagine there wasn't actually a clicker to stop the inflow of fuel when the tank was full, what would happen? The fuel would flow up. It would actually flow out of the tank, down the side of the car, around the tires, pool around your feet, and then you would be standing in the midst of a dangerous, toxic, flammable mess. Well, indeed, that's exactly what happens when we overeat, because we don't have that clicker. When we overload fuel into our bodies, calories, our metabolism is overflowed with that energy, and just like the petrol being dangerous and flammable, so too is too many calories in our body. Now, what are the fuel tanks in our body? Actually, you might be surprised to hear that our body fat, our fat cells, they are called adipocytes, A-D-I-P-O-S-E. Adipose tissue is what we call fat, technically. Adipocytes are the cells that make up our body fat. And in fact, they are critical for our metabolism. Our fat is necessary because fat cells are our fuel tanks. So when we eat calories, our metabolism will naturally store that energy into our fuel tank, just like in a car. It's in our adipocytes. But when we overflow our adipose tissue, we overflow our tanks. You know what happens? Now, the car's tank is metal and very constrained. It won't take more. In our body, we can fill up more and more and more fat cells with the fuel. Okay. And this makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Maybe we run out of fuel, want to store some extras, but one single fat cell can be expanded to 300% of its size, 3 times its size. Now imagine filling up all your fat cells 3 times. You can now imagine if you continuously overeat, all that fuel gets stored up. Okay, that won't leak out yet, but eventually it will. So if you overeat, you're going to gain weight by building up your fuel store. So this is not, I'm not talking about judgment. I'm not criticizing. I'm telling you a biological fact. This is why when we overconsume calories of any sort, we will actually grow our body fat. Now, how does our body normally deal with a typical day's consumption of fuel? Well, we burn it down, right? So just like the car, after you leave the petrol station, you're driving it, you're going to start to deplete the tank right away. So too, after we have a meal, we're going to start to burn down the fuel. Now, you might be running to the airport or catching a train, or you might be going to the office and sitting down and even using your fingers to type on a keyboard. That burns calories. That burns fuel. And what's very interesting is that fuel burning continues even when we are done moving. So even at the end of the day, our bodies continue to try to burn fuel. Let's say at the end of the day, it's bedtime. You're going to get ready for sleep, brush your teeth, get into your pajamas, crawl into bed, and you're going to fall asleep. Well, after dinner, when you have stopped eating, you need insulin, which is a hormone, to draw that fuel into your fat cells. When there's been enough time where there's no more fuel being consumed, your body switches gears like a race car. So imagine your body is like a Ferrari, all right? When you're sleeping, you're switching gears, and the gear switch when you're sleeping is not from storing fuel, which is what you're ready for all day long. All day long, we're prepared. Our metabolism is prepared to store fuel. All right. The more you eat, the more fuel you're going to be storing, the greater eventually your fat stores are going to be loaded up to threefold what it is. But when you're sleeping and your insulin's down, your body shifts gears to fat burning mode. So in fact, our metabolism is so clever that when we're sleeping, we're burning down extra fuel. Okay. And this is actually the way the metabolism actually works. Now, I want to address one more thing just to set the tone for anybody listening to this. This whole idea of we're all born the same way, our bodies all work exactly the same way. This is exactly how the metabolism has now been realized to work. If you overeat, you're going to gain weight because you're going to have more fuel on board. If you don't eat enough, you're going to be hungry. All right. And how much you control your intake is okay. Now, here's the more recent discovery that I find to be a jaw dropper. And that is that human metabolism actually takes place in only 4 phases in our life. All right. And I want to tell you, this is an experiment that involved 3,000 people from 20 countries. And there were 90 researchers involved in this world's largest clinical study on human metabolism. And not only was it the world's largest study across pretty much the entire world, there's 200 some countries. This study did it in half the countries, okay? including Africa and South America, and as well as Europe and North America. Okay, now what they did is they studied people across the lifespan from 2 days old to 90 plus years old. So across the entire human lifespan, they studied what does human metabolism really look like. Now, how do they study metabolism this way? With a drink of water. Okay, let me explain. A drink of water. Water is H2O. There you go. You're having a sip right now. H2O is hydrogen and oxygen, right? Most people know H2O as water. Well, the researchers were able to tweak the hydrogen and tweak the oxygen so you could measure them. So when you gave a baby water or gave an elderly person water, 90 years old, or you gave somebody in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s a drink of water, and you can measure the tweaked atoms, the hydrogen and the oxygen, in their blood, in their urine, in their breath, okay, and in their sweat. Now you can actually develop a picture of what human metabolism actually looks like, because it's metabolism that has to work on, quote, digesting or metabolizing the hydrogen and the oxygen. So this was actually led by Herman Ponzer, a researcher at Duke University a few years ago, published in the journal Science, which is one of the most credible, rigorous scientific journals, one of the most respected, peer-reviewed scientific journals. And what they found was remarkable. When they looked at 3,000 people from 2 days old to 90 days old over 90 countries, they found, and by the way, these are men and women, people with different diseases, different diets, different lifestyles, right?
Cross cultures,
what they found,
cross
cultures, behavior,
ethnicity,
all right, across the entire range. I mean, it really is a remarkable study.
Yeah.
What they found at the very beginning was the metabolism was all over the map, just like you'd expect. A little bit there, helter-skelter, no rhyme or reason. The pattern was chaos, pure human chaos. All right. Well, we now are in an age where we can use machine learning and artificial intelligence to help us analyze data. So what they did is they did one additional calculation. Okay. They knew the age and the weight and the gender of every single person in this study. And what they did is they corrected for the height, weight, gender of every individual by removing the impact of excess body fat. So in other words, they took all this crazy data all over the map. They used a computer to correct for and remove from every data point how much metabolism would be accounted for by excess fat, body fat. When they removed that, it was like pulling the cloak off the statue of David for the first time. They were actually able to see that regardless of who you were, where you were, and what you were dealing with, human metabolism only has 4 phases over the human lifespan. The first phase is from age 0 to 1. There was by the way, I think I said 2. Did I say 2 years old? I meant 2 days old. These infants that were enrolled were 2 days old. So the first phase was from birth, from day 0 to 1 year old. Human metabolism skyrockets. It's like a rocket ship taking off to the cosmos. All right. And in fact, it gets so high at 1 year of age, a baby's metabolism is 20% higher than adults. Now, the second phase is from age 1 to 20. And what happens during this period of time, and if you are a parent and you have teenagers, teenagers are eating a lot of meals, 2 or 3 dinners, they're bouncing off the wall with energy. Your assumption is that their metabolism is going through the roof, is what most parents think. Totally wrong. What's happening is that from the epic highs of metabolism at 1 year old, going down to 20 years old, human metabolism is going down, 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 down to adult levels. That's the second phase. Third phase, and this is the mic drop fact discovery. From age 20 to age 60, the third phase of metabolism, that metabolism, human metabolism, is rock stable, does not change when you're 30, doesn't change when it's 40, 50, or 60. It is rock stable. Our bodies are designed from the age of 20 to 60, hardwired to have a rock stable metabolism. It does not automatically slow down. And then the final phase of metabolism is in age 60 to 90. It goes down a little bit, but only about 17%. So when you're 90, it's the same as when you're 60, which is the same as when you're 20. So, by the way, what I just told you is that 60 is the new 20 if you follow the way your metabolism is supposed to be hardwired. Now, and you might say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense because I know plenty of people in their 60s who have gained a ton of weight. Remember what I told you. To get this result of how human metabolism hardwired, they removed the effect of excess body fat. When you threw body fat back into the equation, you completely suppress the metabolism. So the discovery, number one, is that when you reach middle age, your metabolism doesn't automatically slow down. It's supposed to do what it's going to do. All right. That's great news. It means that we can get back to our 20-year-old selves if we follow how our body's hardwired. Number one. Number two is that it's not that a slow metabolism causes us to gain weight. It's that it can gain body fat. It's that extra body fat slows down our metabolism. It's completely the opposite of what we thought. Now, the final piece that actually is really important to clarify, how we might address this obesity epidemic that you've described in Ireland is really to recognize that we need to have a healthy relationship with our food. Now, those of you listening might think that I'm about to chastise people who eat too much. Not exactly true. Let me tell you that there's one additional discovery about body fat that everyone needs to know about. And that is that not all fat was created equal. In fact, research has now shown we've got two main kinds of body fat in our bodies. We've got white fat and brown fat. White fat is the lumpy, bumpy, wiggly, jiggly fat. Okay. It's called subcutaneous fats under the skin, under your chin, under your arms. It's the muffin top around your waist. Okay. It's on your thighs. It's on your butt. That's what every woman wants to get rid of. And if you're trying to fit into a bridesmaid's dress or a wedding dress, you're going to work really hard to get rid of as much of that as possible. Athletes have almost no or very, very little subcutaneous body fat for the most part, right? Okay, so that's white fat. Now, there's another kind of white fat that is not under the skin. It's packed inside the tube of your body. It's called visceral fat, the word viscera meaning gut. So this is the kind of fat that's packed into the tube of your body. You cut a human in half and then look like right head on, you'll see it's a tube. The body's a tube. The belly's a tube. You can stuff all kinds of things, fat in there, just like if you are packing something for shipping with Federal Express, you can take those styrofoam peanuts and you can pack a lot of peanuts into a box. That's what we can do with visceral fat. It's also white fat. Okay. That visceral fat's very dangerous because it is inflammatory. Remember I told you that spilled gasoline around your feet at the gas station of your overflow, that's inflammatory? You drop a lit cigarette on that and you're going to go up in flames. Same deal with overeating. If you have a lot of visceral fat building up, and by the way, visceral fat in the tube of your body can be in a skinny person or a big body person. I don't care if you are 115 pounds and 5'7", okay? You can still have a lot of visceral fat. We've sometimes referred to it as skinny fat, but it's like putting a lot of peanuts into a skinny tube, all right? You can still do that, and that's highly inflammatory, very, very dangerous. So subcutaneous white fat doesn't look very good when it's under the skin. When you pack it into the body, it becomes very, very dangerous. The more you eat, the worse you're not gonna like the way you look, and the more visceral fat you're gonna build. That's very dangerous. So that's one kind of fat that our body wants to control that by burning the fuel down. Now, the second kind of fat is called brown fat, and literally these colors refer to what the fat looks like under the microscope. So under the microscope, Connor, if I were to take a piece of your brown fat, and you and I both have it, all right, it would look brown. It would be like if you went to a paint store, a hardware store, and you wanted to buy paint for your room, and you went to the brown section and picked up, it would look exactly like brown, okay? Now, brown fat is not wiggly jiggly. It's not lumpy bumpy. You can't see it. It's not close to the skin. Brown fat is close to the bone. it's wafer thin, like a piece of paper. It's plastered around our neck. There's a little bit of it underneath our breastbone, a little bit between our shoulder blades, and a little bit tucked inside our belly. Okay. Now, brown fat actually is remarkable because it doesn't actually store energy. Brown fat is a kind of fat that burns energy. So when we expose ourselves to stimuli, okay, that will turn on our brown fat. What's a good example? Cold temperature. All right. So if you are out in the cold, that cold temperature, will light up your brown fat. Your brown fat turns on like a space heater, or think about this in your kitchen, a gas range, the gas stove top. What happens? You want to boil some water, you turn on the gas, click, 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 whoosh, right? You get the flame. Now you boil your tea. Put your kettle on and boil some water for tea. Now, what happens with brown fat, if you expose it to cold temperatures, it'll be turning it on, click, 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 whoosh. Now, in a gas range on your kitchen, that burner is drawing energy from the gas lines going to your house, from the neighborhood, or maybe a tank on the side of your house. In your body, the brown fat, when it goes click, 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 whoosh, draws the energy, burns that energy coming from white fat, harmful fat, visceral fat first. So brown fat, good fat, fights bad fat, white fat, and you turn it on in ways that your metabolism can actually help you. Now, cold temperature will do it, but so do certain foods. Coffee, broccoli, tomatoes, pears, onions, capers, the list goes on, seafood. When you eat certain foods, chili peppers, they will trigger your brown fat to turn on. Now, I'll tell you one last thing for anybody who's listening, who's maybe a longevity, interested in longevity, has been following all the research on longevity. Maybe you're a biohacker and you're really into this kind of stuff, all right? You've probably heard of the term mitochondria. Mitochondria are really the fuel cells, the nuclear batteries in your body. They generate heat. Well, you know what brown fat is made out of? Mitochondria. And you know why brown fat is brown? Because the mitochondria, these little fuel cells, the batteries, nuclear batteries that generate energy, that go click, 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 whoosh. They create the spark. To create the whoosh, they burn, all right? They're filled with iron, okay? They're just part of your body is filled with iron. What happens when you take a pile of iron nails and put them outside on your porch? They turn brown. Now you know why brown fat is brown, because they're loaded with mitochondria that are the energy cells, and they rust, and basically they turn on with certain stimuli, certain foods, certain temperatures, they turn on, and you can actually use good fat to burn down bad fat. So I just gave you a little treatise of the latest state of the art of human metabolism. And if you want to actually regain what Mother Nature gifted us when we were born, what we want to do is to be able to help our bodies seek its own natural water line, which is that hardwired metabolism.
Brilliant. Now we've chatted about the foods you should eat to activate the metabolism, if you like, and get the brown fat burning. And I want to ask you about what foods we definitely shouldn't eat. But before that, you mentioned something very interesting. You used the word judgment. So I want to ask you about judgment. I heard you say before as well, you spoke about repressed anger and when it comes to overeating. In terms of the psychological processes that are happening here as well, what's your perspective? Like, is this crisis we're facing in Ireland, is this a mental health issue? What's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, our brain is influenced by so many factors, and yet it's our brain that controls our appetite. It's our brain that controls our behavior. It's our brain that actually gives us the advanced warning signs to slow down. Our brains signal us danger, right? We've all had that. You're walking down the street and there's some shadowy figures across the street are approaching you. You have that sixth sense, watch out, right? So our brains are really hardwired, very sensitive. When you actually put stress on the brain, and that stress can come from anger, can be from depression, can come from overwork, can come from lack of sleep, can come from illness. All right, can come, and I think that we're really seeing this now, Connor, in a big way. Even those of us who soldiered through the pandemic from 2020 onwards, and feel like, oh, I made it okay. Like that was an inconvenience. A lot of us, talk like that, kind of brushing it off. I don't think so. I think all of us suffered a global human trauma. All right. The kind of shell shock that you would get with a war, like a world war, truly. When we saw those empty streets of New York City, or Rome being completely empty, or Venice being completely empty, that was a human experience we went through. We cannot underestimate the kind of emotional crisis that we suffered as part of humanity, even from that recent thing. Now you add climate crisis. Now you add war. Then Russia, Ukraine, you name it. There's so many things that are stressful for us. Not surprisingly, our better judgments are easily overwhelmed by things. And one of our compensatory mechanisms when we're stressed and our brain isn't functioning the way it's supposed to, remember, I gave you a very simple analogy for people listening, which is walking down the street and you see a shadowy figure approaching you, that danger sign, okay? When you're so stressed, your danger signals don't register the same way. So when we sit down with a plate of food, regardless of what the food is, I know you want to talk about the food to avoid. Let's talk about any food, even healthy food. If you overeat, it's like going to the petrol station and overloading on the fuel. All right. Soon you'll be standing in the middle of a dangerous, toxic, flammable mess. Maybe because you're vegetarian, or maybe because you're vegan, or maybe because you only eat organic food. Maybe you have a higher quality of fuel that you are standing in a pool of, but yet it's still gasoline that's pooled around your feet, still inflammatory, still dangerous, still going to overwhelm your metabolism and cause all these other consequences of obesity, which we haven't talked about yet, but everything from diabetes, vascular damage, organ failure, neurodegeneration, and cancer. So again, the diseases that we all, listen, I have very, very good friends in Ireland. I've been to your country many times. It's a lovely place. I've enjoyed every trip I've ever had to Ireland. And I've been to visit some cancer centers and cancer researchers there. And I'm a cancer researcher myself, which is partly what brought me there. I will tell you that nobody wants cancer. Nobody wants chronic disease. Nobody wants Alzheimer's. Nobody wants morbid obesity and complications of diabetes. And yet we feel like we are almost helpless against sort of that which sneaks up on us over time, in which the mental health crisis leads to a physical health crisis, which leads to chronic disease. So what I mean to say is that what you're describing, a country that is approaching a crisis state, has so many critical factors to be looking at, from stress management to access to better, healthier foods, maybe regulating away some of the more harmful foods, to getting more physically active, to our recent history even of what we've all been through. These are the converging forces that are conspiring against us. But the good news, and this is really what I wanted to start this conversation about, is that our body actually is designed to do good things for us. So if we can actually realize every day when we wake up that the mechanism that we want to harness actually belongs to us, we were born with it, and we can actually make moves. It's like you never have to say, it's too late for me. Never too late. Let's get back to who we are. This is sort of the framework, I think, with which we need to approach this obesity crisis.
Obesity is progressive, but it's also reversible, is what I'm hearing from you. And it's I suppose, treatable in a way. Ireland is also a country, as you know well, it's associated with famine, with the Great Famine. Millions of people left the country. Millions of people died. Millions of people went to your wonderful country and to seek safe harbor and safe sanctuary there. So within, I would say, 7 generations, there's a massive swing. And I think we need to, I mean, I think hopefully, and I imagine there will be people looking at the psychological trauma post-COVID, and seeing how that impacts us in terms of our eating habits and our lifestyle habits. Have you come across anything in research related to post-COVID in terms of a trauma response, in terms of how we eat and how we consume food?
Well, we do know that that people who were infected by COVID wind up having intense inflammation in the body. And inflammation actually compromises our metabolism in ways that can be quite damaging. And so this whole idea of eating the rainbow, plant-based foods containing the polyphenols that are anti-inflammatory are literally quite healing for some of the physical sequelae or consequences of having really any disease, but it's including COVID. I also think that that one of the things that, of course, is the reaction to deprivation, which many of us felt during the pandemic, is really this overexuberance. And I think that the idea of actually aiming towards moderation is something that virtually every health and wellness expert will say is a truth. Listen, if you enjoy food, Connor, I enjoy cooking. I love being in the kitchen, and I love the taste of food. I love exploring different foods from different cultures and the tastiness of it. But when you're doing that, if you have a big plate of food in front of you, you don't have to finish it all. And you don't have to pile an excessive amount on your plate when you have the serving spoon either. You don't have to go for seconds. And you don't have to eat after dinner and eat a late night snack. These are the kinds of things that we didn't have the privilege or the luxury of considering even 100 years ago, or less than 100 years ago. Back, after the first two world wars, people were very, very conscious of the lack of food, that was in existence. It was somehow after the 1950s, I think worldwide, when prosperity started to rise, industrialization started to really showcase the prosperity of the post-World War, especially Western countries, where everything became fast, cheap, and tasty. All right. Then we felt like there were no boundaries anymore. And then everybody just went to town going crazy. And again, that back to the petrol station, this is just overfilling our tanks. So I think that it's time for us to get back to basics, realizing that the modern biological understanding of our metabolism shows us, hey, you know what? Our body knows what to do. There's only 4 phases it goes through. If we remove extra body fat by burning it down through brown fat, better eating, even cold temperatures. This whole idea about cold temperatures. You've heard about the
cold water
bath,
immersion therapy.
Cold water immersion, ice plunge. Hey, it works because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, the turning on the brown fat. No, but there's no single bullet. I think it's really about being more aware, which is, I think one of the big advantages of doing a podcast like what you're doing and communicating to, thousands of people is, number one, making people realize that their own power lies in their own hand. Okay, this isn't just waiting for a knight in a shining armor to come and hand you a pill to take. There's a lot we can do for ourselves. If I had to give some practical advice on how to counter the societal-wide trend towards obesity on an individual basis. So again, no fear, guilt, shame, which is sort of what everybody has always talked about when it comes to body fat. Let me just give you a couple of simple ones. Number one, stay physically active. The more you move, the more fuel you're going to burn, just like in a car. Stay on the road, drive around a little bit, okay? And you don't need a trainer. You don't need to have a gym membership. You don't need to prepare for a marathon, okay? Just even walking 30, 40 minutes a day, every day, consistently, actually that will start to, that's kind of physical motion. If you have a desk job, which many people do these days, get up and take a break and walk around. Can't walk around outside because it's raining in Ireland? Then go out or too cold, then walk around the house or walk around the building, okay? No problem. Physical activity. Number two, get good sleep. When we're sleeping is when that Ferrari gear shift occurs and we're beginning to burn down fat. So contrary to popular belief, when we think we're sleeping, we're not doing anything, you know, you lazy dude. No, when we're sleeping, good sound sleep, we are actually burning down body fat. So we're improving we're sculpting our metabolism. Got to get good sleep. If you don't have good sleep, you're not actually getting, your metabolism's not burning down the fat the way it should be when you're sleeping. Number three, lower your stress. Now, easier said than done. Okay. But I'll tell you how important it is to lower stress, because when our stress hormones are up, our cortisol, our epinephrine, these are the natural fight or flight molecules that our body, when you feel tense because you have an exam, or or your boss is going to be testing you or evaluating you, or you're having a fight with your spouse, all these things are stressors that actually suppresses our ability to burn down body fat. Okay, that again kind of starts to go against our natural metabolism. And then let's talk about, and by the way, stress. You know what? Here's one upside to social media. All right, one great way. This is like a little hack I'm going to share with everybody. Social media allows us to find funny things, funny short videos that can make you laugh out loud. All right. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're somebody who says, I don't have a sense of humor. I'm sure you've seen something on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, that actually makes you laugh. The great news about the algorithm, there's a lot of things that are not good about the algorithm. One of the good things about the algorithm is you find something you laugh at and you look at it again, it'll keep feeding you more funny stuff. All right. Even a little smile or a big belly laugh is actually good. If you go hang out with friends, if you go to a comedy club, anything that actually takes you out of that negative, sour mood actually can be really helpful for lowering stress. I can't emphasize that enough, because a lot of us just are told to soldier shoulder our pain, soldier through it, deal with it. It'll get better later. No, we have to conduct self-care to lower our stress. Now let's talk about food. Simple things. All right. Eat healthy foods. Mostly plant-based. You can have some animal protein, not a problem. Fish is even better. All right. But eat mostly plant-based foods with dietary fiber. Do fibery foods, which feed our gut microbiome and lower inflammation and improve our mental well-being, do they always taste stringy? Nope. Some of the softest foods in the world are actually very rich with fiber. A ripe peach, 5 to 6 grams of dietary fiber. Avocado, spread it on a toast, sourdough bread, packed with dietary fiber. A mushroom. So think about like a traditional English breakfast. You're going to have sauté some mushrooms. Guess what? That also has dietary fiber. So you can look it up online, foods that have dietary fiber. Okay. Good for gut health. They are plant-based. That's good for you. Eat the rainbow, lowers inflammation, good for your metabolism. Okay. All these are good steps, but that's not the most important lesson that I want to actually leave you guys with. Number one, don't have seconds, only firsts. Okay. And in those first, don't fill your plate. Take only 2/3 of what your eyes would normally take. Withhold that. Don't load your plate up. And by the way, if somebody else loaded your plate for you, like a chef at a restaurant, okay, or maybe even a friend at a friend's house, don't feel like you have to finish all the food on the plate. That is true. That's what our moms told us when we were growing up. But if you care about your metabolism, don't do it. If you eat slowly enough and savor your food, you stop eating when you are satisfied, not when you're full. Feeling full means I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable now. Okay, that's what we've come to. But if you eat slowly and savor your food, when you feel satisfied, which is really kind of a brain thing, then you stop. You push the plate away. All right, you're done. These are easy ways. So one last little food tip is actually, after you have dinner, let's say that you have dinner at 7 o'clock. I know it might be later, it might be earlier. Most people eat for about an hour. I know in Italy and Greece and Spain, they eat late and they eat for a long time. Yeah. But let's say Ireland. Okay. You're eating somewhere between, 6 and 7. Typically, you're going to eat for an hour, maybe in a typical family. There's a lot going on. when you're done eating dinner and you put your dishes away in the sink, that's it. Don't eat again. Don't eat. Don't eat a late night dessert. Don't reach for a snack. Don't bring a bag of chips with you or crisps over to the couch for watching television. Don't. And the reason is this. When you're done with dinner, you put your dishes away, you are done with food for the day. That means that all the time that you have in the evening before you go to bed is time that your body has to lower that insulin, shift the gear of your Ferrari body into metabolism state so that you can take advantage of all this non-eating, low insulin time to burn down extra body fat. And then one last tip here is that try to get 8 hours of sleep. That's good for us, your brain, your immune system, everything. Good for your metabolism. When you get up in the morning, don't do what your mom said. Okay. My mom used to always tell me as soon as I got up, hurry up, get down to the kitchen, eat something so you can actually go to school and learn. All right. Don't. When you get up in the morning, this is what I do now. I take my time getting ready, getting dressed. And what I do is I wait at least 1 hour before I eat anything. All right. Now you've gained all that time after dinner the night before you go to bed, plus the 8 hours of sleeping, plus 1 extra hour. And if you do the math very quickly, you can get to 12 hours of not eating, which is intermittent fasting. And that means you spent 50% of the day, 12 hours out of 24, fasting and burning down extra energy. These little tips that I just gave you, that are like, none of them are difficult to do. All of them are very practical. This is a way to help you get back to your hardwired metabolism.
What you're talking about is time restricted feeding there and closing that window. And it's something I don't normally eat at all until around 12 to 1 o'clock. And I know, and I'm in my 40s, my mid 40s now, and I know the impact it has had on my physicality. It's just incredible. A couple of myths I wanted to get your perspective on a couple of things. The carnivore diet. Let's jump. What are your overall thoughts on carnivore diet?
The upside of eating meat, animal protein, is that you get a lot of protein, amino acids, and you get iron and a lot of other micronutrients that really only meat provides in easy and abundant ways. The problem with meat, so you got to understand, I'm a scientist, and I try to go with the data, and I'm also somebody that enjoys food, so I try to be reasonable. Okay, the moment you actually go for deprivation or extremes, that's where food becomes like a religion, and you got it's either the savior or the devil. I don't believe in that with food.
Yeah,
I think any extreme is not going to be very healthy for you. I think if you eat animal proteins, okay, beef, pork, chicken, poultry, or fish, seafood, have it in moderation, and try to be aware that red meat actually contains an abundance of saturated fats. Saturated fats are extra workload on your body, okay, extra fuel in your body too. You don't really need that. And so, listen, if you really enjoy a steak au poivre or, something like that, I would rather you enjoy a really, really modest piece of high quality meat, okay, rather than the fake ultra processed meats that are out there. Those what do you call them? Like plant-based burgers. Those are super ultra processed. I always tell people, I'd rather, if you really love a steak, don't eat it all the time. Don't eat too much of it. But when you do, get a really high quality piece that you're going to really enjoy. Prepare it the way you love it. Okay. That's much better than having these ultra processed fake plant-based burgers all the time, because then you're getting ultra processed foods. You're kind of defeating the purpose of lowering your meat intake. So carnivore diet, I would say, it's not the healthiest for the long term. If you go all carnivore, because I think those diets tend to be kind of extreme. But, it's also sort of like, if you're a vegan and you go the other way, eat no meat, you're going to be missing some micronutrients if you don't actually watch out. And you're going to have to find ways to balance yourself. So, I think most of the extreme diets are very difficult to follow for long periods of time.
Ketogenic diet, overall perspective?
Ketogenic diet actually originated, the modern version originated as a treatment for epilepsy in children, because when you uh, force your body to undergo ketosis, which is producing energy through a different source in your body. We call them ketones. It's like making your own fuel, your own petrol. All right. It acts on your brain because your brain is one of the most energy intensive organs in your body. Ketones in your brain actually can chill out your brain. And from an epilepsy perspective, it actually can abort epileptic attacks. It can lower the rate of seizures. It's really quite amazing,
Wow.
even especially in children for whom other solutions are not really reasonable. There's another situation in which ketogenic diets seem to have clinical evidence for benefits, and that's with a brain tumor. If you've got glioblastoma, which is a deadly cancer of the brain, a ketogenic diet seems to actually have a somewhat beneficial effect. It's not a cure-all, not a magic bullet, but it does have a benefit, probably because it's the milieu, the environment of your brain responds to the ketones. But it's really, really hard to maintain a ketogenic diet. And long-term ketogenesis, which is having ketones running around your body, you're not eating all the regular food, you're missing micronutrients from whole plant-based foods and regular foods and carbs. And then what winds up happening is that you wind up being in a state of ketosis. That actually by itself can be a medical emergency. When I went to medical school, one of the things that we used to see is people with diabetes who are not properly treated. They wind up creating their own ketones and they go into a ketosis and you can go into a coma. So really, it's not intended to be a long-term healthy pattern of living and, kind of deprives you from a lot of food as well.
If we look at photographs from the United States, in particular of the 1970s, we see very different body shapes. We look at compared to photographs and visual imagery from 2024, 2025. There is clearly cultural, societal change, massive cultural and societal changes have happened in the United States in particular and in the Western world. If you were invited to participate in the United States government and advise the Trump government, perhaps Robert Kennedy or formerly Joe Biden, where would you start with the American diet?
It's such a great question. I mean, in a way, it's a $1 billion-trillion question when you add up all the healthcare costs, that occur in America due to diseases that are associated with diet. So I don't think there's a single answer. What I would say is that we should be mounting an education campaign, much in the same way that countries in the past have mounted education campaigns against smoking. I think we should have a kind of an education campaign for encouraging healthy eating. And healthy eating is very personalized. I think that there's no set menu that works for everyone when it comes to healthy nutrition. You've heard about personalized nutrition, precision medicine. Listen, this is all true. Everything is precision. Everything is personalized. Your preferences, Connor, and my preferences, the way your body processes different things that you put into it, are going to be different than mine. I would imagine you're going to process Guinness a lot better than my body would.
I was going to ask you about alcohol. Alcohol is really bad, right? It's really bad.
And listen, I have a very particular point of view about alcohol, and I want to, since you're bringing it up, I want to say it.
Yeah.
Alcohol itself, ethanol, is a chemical formula. It's ETOH, ethanol. All right. It doesn't matter if it's and it's the same stuff that's in beer, wine, whiskey, you name it. Okay. Any alcohol is going to have that ethanol in it. That ethanol is toxic. It's a universal toxin. It's toxic to your heart. It's toxic to your brain. It's toxic to your liver. Your liver actually detoxifies the alcohol, fortunately. So, and that it's toxic to your brain, which is why we have hangovers the next day. Until your body clears it out, you're not feeling yourself. Okay, you're not functioning the way that you normally function. But And so cutting down or cutting out alcohol and avoiding excessive consumption of alcohol is actually a really, really important step. Alcohol is also carbohydrates, right? So you're adding more fuel into your body. And man, it's a lot easier to drink, some tall mugs and get a lot of calories into your body, which then load up on your fat cells, as we talked about earlier, and can overwhelm your metabolism and cause that inflammable, dangerous fat. Oh, and by the way, when you have alcohol in your system, you're not sleeping well. When you're not sleeping well, your Ferrari isn't shifted into full gear, so you're not burning down the body fat. So you can kind of see what the story is. However, I do want to say this. Alcohol, wine, beer, spirits have really been part of our humanity, our human nature, part of our human society ever since we started growing grains and fermenting them. Okay, this is like 10,000 years of human history. We've always used alcohol to celebrate big events, birthdays, weddings, funerals, wakes, graduation, holidays. All right, and I think that in the quest for better health, we always have to remember our humanity, right? So I think that if you're going to actually enjoy alcohol, okay, do it at a wedding, do it at a wake, do it at a graduation. Just don't overconsume. And what I tell people is that I think that we have to balance the things that make us human sometimes with the things that make us healthy. And as long as we have sort of information that we're making informed decisions, I think that's okay.
And then finally, because I know before I let you go, I know you're a very busy man and an in-demand man. But I do want to get your perspective on this. The next Dr. William Lee that's coming up, and he's 19, 20 years of age, or she, and they're just starting out on their medical clinical journey. Where should they go? What would your advice be to that young person who wants to follow in Dr. William Lee's footsteps?
Well, I had a very twisting journey throughout my whole career. So, and I don't know if I'd recommend somebody to follow all the twists and turns I have, but I will tell you, because I've thought about this, Connor, if I were to advise a young person who's interested in health and wants to get involved with an area of enormous promise and excitement where the future breakthroughs are going to come through that can really pull the bow back and send a single arrow through a number of different diseases, I would advise a young person to dive into the gut microbiome, gut health. They don't have to be a gastroenterologist. They don't have to specialize in intestinal medicine, all right? But they should embrace everything that we're discovering. It's an undiscovered country. We're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. There's so much under the surface about gut health. Probably it's the reason that we form some cancers. Probably it's the reason that we have dementia, at least some dementias. Probably it's the reason we have some mental illnesses, including depression and schizophrenia. Probably it's also one of the under root causes of autism, believe it or not. Okay. Not to mention food allergies. And so I'm somebody who really encourages young people who are interested in the kinds of things that I do, science, health, medicine. You know what? Look for common denominators of health and disease. Try to find the core truths that apply to so many things. So you don't wind up becoming an expert in something an inch wide and you go a mile deep, and then you're the world expert in an inch wide. All right. I think that, to really have an impact on society. Well, listen, specialize is good, except you want to actually, it is good. Like, I'm an angiogenesis expert. I study blood vessels. I know probably more about them than any other topic of research and science research, one of the world's experts. But I think you're looking for areas to become an expert in that cut across many different vertical silos, so that you can actually take what you know and apply it across the board in ways that can be game changing. Because, listen, there's something very satisfying for a young doctor who is for the first time learning how to take care of one patient at a time. Man, is that such a good feeling to be able to offer care and expertise to help somebody through a rough time or guide them through their health or sickness. But if you're like me, you're looking for how to have the greatest impact possible. And seeing one patient at a time, for me, is frustratingly too small in impact. You want to go big, you really look for those common denominators. And gut health, the gut microbiome is one of those areas where, one day we're going to be able to take a javelin and throw that through the gut microbiome and skewer many different diseases all at once.
It sounds like an unexplored, well, not explored enough, undiscovered terrain. It's the frontier. The next frontier is what I'm hearing from you in medicine.
Yes, exactly.
Dr. William Lee, thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.